This is our July the 25th, 2023 episode, sponsored by the unordaineables in our diocese. And these were individuals that were offered ordination on condition that they remain silent and shut up about the things they've observed in the Catholic Church. So we are going to dedicate this to them, and we thank them for their sponsorship. Something's Not Right, introduction, page 1. This is abuse. The words stopped me in my tracks. My wife and I had just finished recounting our story to some friends who had stopped by to check on us. They'd heard we were resigning from the church where I was youth pastor and were packing up to move, and they were worried about our family. They knew how much we loved the church and how committed we were to serving with integrity. But after hearing the details of our experience the past few years, the confusion, the secrets, the oppression, these words were their diagnosis. I didn't want to believe them. Nobody had sexually or physically harmed me. Other people in our community had suffered far worse abuse. Felt like a label reserved for them, for the blatant and the violent experiences they had endured. I could think of a million reasons my situation wasn't like theirs. And yet I couldn't deny what my wife and I had been through. I didn't know how to talk about it, and I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling. But deep down I knew something's not right. That night was a critical step in my journey toward freedom, recognizing the language of abuse. If you're like me, you may hear the word abuse and think, as I did, of physical or sexual harm done to another person. But the truth is the term abuse is appropriate to far more situations than those. When someone treats you as an object, they are willing to harm for their own benefit. Abuse has occurred, and that person has become an abuser. Some of the worst forms of abuse are psychological. The victim may never be physically touched, but nevertheless is traumatized by the experience of being emotionally manipulated and held captive by lies, threats, and neglect. A husband can control all the finances in a marriage and use that control to coerce his wife into compliance. This is financial abuse. A parent can destroy the self-image of a child through verbal attacks. Verbal abuse often targets those who lack the means to withdraw or the power to advocate for themselves. In other words, abuse involves any action that takes power from another in an attempt to use them, and it almost always begins with language, words that lead to confusion and captivity. This language is evil's greatest secret, unknown to most, even its users. This language provides evil with its primary desire, power. Its power acquired and retained through deception and used to harm and destroy lives. The language of abuse is, at its core, a collection of tactics for deception. And it allows the evil of abuse to spread because language is so important for abusers gaining power. And also for restoring power to those who have been abused. I use the terms abuse and abuser throughout this book, even though, as in my experience, it can be difficult to see your own situation that way at first. Through my own experience of abuse at the church and through my academic studies, I became aware of a branch of sociology called impression management. When I first discovered impression management research, I was shocked to find it wasn't more broadly available, and that it hadn't been widely applied to the various and ever-present scandals of our culture. Impression management tactics seem to name the very ways that abusers gained their power in my life and in the stories I'd come across. My own research has focused on impression management in evangelical organizations, but the tactics are not unique to that context. I've collected and analyzed nearly 1,000 cases of clergy abuse over the last 5 years to understand how abuse pervades these institutions. But the more I grow in my understanding of impression management tactics, the more I see how these same tactics are used by abusers of all kinds to perpetuate all types of abuse. The tactics of impression management used by organizations to cover up their wrongs are the same tactics used every day by abusers throughout the world, and that have been used by evil powers throughout history. There is a pattern that accompanies abuse, as if abusers are somehow reading from the same playbook. If we can learn to decode these evil tactics, if we can learn the language of abuse, we can stop the cycle. We can make abusers less effective at accomplishing destruction in our lives. The ability to identify and describe tactics that were previously unidentifiable and indescribable will restore the power that was taken from you. Who is this book for? Maybe you still aren't sure whether the information in this book will apply to your situation or experience. Maybe the words abuse and abuser will still feel harsh and extreme, words for what has happened to other people but not you. Maybe all you know is that something's not right, that something feels off. When you think about a certain relationship or interaction, that's okay. I wrote this book primarily for you. Even if you aren't sure whether what you're experiencing is abuse, I encourage you to keep reading. My hope is that by the end of the book, you'll have the insight, language, and direction you need to clarify your situation and to take any necessary steps to personal freedom. Freedom comes first by understanding, and understanding means having the language to identify and talk about your situation. I want to give you that more than anything. If, however, you come to this book with a clear understanding that the situation you find yourself in is in fact abusive, my hope is that these pages hold power for you as well. In being able to recognize, label, and describe the tactics of a deception, you might be able to resist the ways in which such behaviors can be used to manipulate you. Understanding the tactics that have been used to coerce you is an integral part of the healing process. As you make sense of and gain the ability to describe what you've experienced, may you find the inner power to shine a light on these dark places of your story. I've also written this book for those who are seeking to advocate for victims and survivors of abuse. I commend you for doing so, and I know how quickly others can condemn you for your efforts and question your motivation. I've been encouraged by the many advocates I've gotten to know. They sacrifice their time and energy to provide support, prevent abuse, and create a safer future. They speak truth to power for the sake of repair and redemption. They choose to side with the oppressed despite knowing it often will require standing in the dangerous position between the oppressed and the oppressors. It might mean remaining in that stance until the battle is won, requiring tremendous sacrifice, courage, hope, and faith. I hope this book can also speak to those who are enabling abusers, either willfully or unknowingly. I hope your eyes are open to see the abuser in your midst. That abuser might be a leader of an organization that you have come to love and support. I understand how difficult it can be to acknowledge when people you love and respect turn out to be different than you thought. But it is necessary to understand the important role you play as a bystander. Abusive individuals and organizations might be using impression management tactics to hide what happened behind the scenes so their act can continue. You must recognize that it is not just doing the hiding, those doing the hiding who are at fault, but also those who benefit from the abuser's show and want to continue. We might want to ignore what we see when just a portion of the curtain is pulled back, hoping that through time or circumstance, the abuses will be resolved on their own. But organizations and their leaders are always faced with two choices. When abuse happening on their watch comes to light, adopt truth-telling and transparency, regardless of the impact on their approval, status, or image, or use the same tactics of abuse in attempt to retain or regain legitimacy. I'm going to repeat that. Leaders are always faced with two choices when abuse happening on their watch comes to light. Adopt truth-telling and transparency, regardless of the impact of their approval, status, or image, or use the same tactics of abuse in attempting to retain or regain legitimacy. This book will help you respond to exposure with truth-telling by making you aware of tactics that might work against truth, justice, and compassion. Enabling abuse means allowing it the power it needs to control others. When I was in the midst of my own abusive experience, I felt as if abusers had taken hold of the pen of my life story. There were moments when I did not want to turn another page for fear of what the next paragraph or chapter might hold. I had lost control of my own story. It was in the hands of those who wanted to do me harm. Perhaps that is your experience right now. If it is, I hope this book will give you the validation you need to know that you are not in the wrong. You are not alone and deserve to be able to write your own story. I also hope this book will open your eyes. The best antidote to deception is truth. Silence grants evil exactly what it needs to be effective. Truth helps us speak what has been unspeakable, express what has been inexpressible, and articulate feelings for which we could not find the appropriate words. Truth helps us move from confusion to clarity, from captivity to freedom. Something's not right, but by understanding the tactics of the abusers in your life, you can take back the pen and write your story anew. We conclude on page 7 for today. And now for a commentary. You have a little sip of coffee here. Short commentary. I'm Catholic. I heard just this weekend a homily from a Catholic priest to the parish, and I'm pretty sure this priest might not believe this because his own life is a little different. But he says he uses the quote in the Bible about "Thou shalt not judge," don't judge, and then also don't pull the weeds. Well, we're Catholic, and if anybody has been paying attention, you know, Catholic clergy and staff are under have lost a lot of credibility, are under a lot scrutiny, and criticized for the abuse going on in the church. So let's take a look at that. You take some words isolated in the Bible, don't pull the weeds, don't judge, and then we look at what that says to me, and many people don't confront evil. That's exactly contrary to the image that Jesus Christ had. So Jesus did not just preach, Jesus confronted evil. So I would ask him, how does he confront, I would ask the priests in the Catholic Church of our diocese, how do you reconcile taking an isolated statement about thou shalt not judge and weed pulling with the stance that the Catholic Church has in the history of contested canonizations for over 200 years? The Franciscans, the Dominicans, orders are fighting each other in legal battles in church court over who is going to be a saint, who's not going to be a saint, contested canonizations. And how about that? How do you explain that? Isn't that a lot of weed pulling? Isn't that a lot of judging? How about if you don't weed pull and don't judge, the parents are going to just let the schools do surgery on the bottoms of their minor children? So you don't see a problem with that? You don't think that we should weed pull and get those people out of there? We shouldn't judge they're doing wrong to our children? Let me go on. Another category. In the church, the Catholic Church, there is a court, official court. You can take people with what's called contentious proceedings. That takes a lot of weed pulling and judging. Every time you have a defrocking of a priest, there's a lot of weed pulling and a lot of judging going on. Every time you have an annulment of a marriage, a lot of weed pulling, a lot of judging going on. So I think what it is this priest is selling the party line because the priests and these clergy and their staff do not want to be scrutinized. They do not want to have to account for their behaviors. They don't want to have to be transparent. And laity are saying, wait a minute, I want you accountable. If you're in Catholic Charities, and if you, pastor, have given money to Catholic Charities, and Catholic Charities is funding problems at the border that have to do with the sex trade, I want to talk about that. I want to weed pull, and I want to judge you. If you Catholic clergy, from the bottom to middle management to the cardinals, are involved in trafficking through supporting and turning a blind eye to the border crossings that are happening in the United States right now, and they have that the pass, they call it the Dorian Pass, I want to know about that. I want to know if you support these policies. I think that's weed pulling. That is acceptable weed pulling and acceptable judging. But you tell me. You explain it. More importantly, let's talk about this. Jesus Christ confronted evil. Remember, he said to the leaders of the day, you pit of vipers. What about that ministry? Do you know, folks out there who are Catholic or not Catholic, the Catholic Church has an entire church ministry called disciplinary ministry on errant members of the clergy. That includes their staff. What's that all about? You discipline. They have it, but it's atrophied, and they don't want to talk about that. And they use this teaching to beat you over the head. So you just ask them questions. Don't explain it. That's what they get paid for. Explain it. So what about Jesus when he confronts you, pit of vipers? Who's doing that ministry? Father, have you confronted the pit of vipers in the Catholic Church recently? How about this? Jesus says, you whitewashed sepulchres. How about that? That's a ministry, disciplinary ministry. Jesus is confronting evil. Jesus is living Christianity dangerously, isn't he? How about you living that? Which whitewashed sepulchres in the Catholic Church have you confronted recently? Meaning leadership, including clergy and staff. How about that? Who are just simply bystanders. And then it was Jesus who said to the leaders, get behind me, Satan, judging them and pulling weeds when they were doing the wrong thing. So let's talk about that, okay? So we thank Wade Mullins, and we we're giving voice to those who cannot come out because of the deep state problems in the Catholic Church, the corruption in the Catholic Church. These are men who are told, I want you to assume it's reported to us, and we have been asked to share this message. So we do. We share the message. There are men who are not being ordained, good men. And instead of the good men, we have weak men who are being ordained, mediocre men who are being ordained, that recreate fragile vocations. Now, we'll go into that. We'll interview Teresa later on. But we are gaining function on how to do podcasting, how to do YouTubing, and just ask questions. All you got to do is ask questions. Be careful who you give your money to. And bystanders, you benefit. If you're working in the parish and you think you get a pass because you say nothing, you just you cause no trouble. No, you benefit. You benefit as a bystander from those individuals who are doing wrong. And they have, you've filtered a lot of the church teachings. You've destroyed doctrine. And you have destroyed community. And we want to be witnesses to that. Like Solzhenitsyn. There is also Viktor Frankl. I think he's a survivor of a witness testimony on man's search for meaning. And Solzhenitsyn, and there were several others. You look at the Jewish people who created the Yad Vashem, the memory, and the museum. Never again. And so we have Catholic Yad Vashams popping all over the country. All right. This is a Christian, this is our corporal works of mercy, our spiritual works of mercy. As Catholics, we categorize what we do, and we're trying to do better. And we pray for Cardinal Stefan Wazinski, who was of the opinion that the modern world needed another kind of martyrdom, the martyrdom of work, not of blood. And in his prison diary, that's what he wrote about. And he faced communism in Poland. And so, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.